He was the foreman there and took care of all the ladies, told them what to do. And then after Shawgo's closed, he worked for the same company, the chemical company that took over.
Amkin.
And he retired from there.
Oh, wow.
He worked there all his life. And he would walk home. He'd go to work, walk to work in the morning, and then Grandma would fix his lunch, and he would walk home to eat his sandwich, and then he would walk back, and then about 4:30, he'd walk back home again, and Grandma always had the meal fixed and ready on the table. I remember that.
Yeah,
Always.
4:30. We always
ate
eat at 4:30.
4:30, yeah.
But the funniest thing was my grandmother loved Okie music.
Oh, yeah, she did.
Okie music?
Yeah.
Yeah, and she would blast the radio at 4 o'clock every day. She blasted up high, and you could hear it all the way down the corner, and everybody would laugh about it. And she loved her music, and she'd be cooking while she listened to her music.
Yeah, listening to the music.
Yeah.
Country music.
Yeah.
But this is not a bad thing, but all of the people that came here in the 40s from Oklahoma and Arkansas, my grandmother would call Okies. So that's where the Okie music came from.
Yeah.
That is, so we say it not in a bad way. We say it in, that's just the way it was.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And they were poor.
People were very open about
Right,
things.
they were poor like we were poor. We all lived in Niles, and we had Mexican people and Italian people, Portuguese people, and then we had when the people came from the Midwest, when
Yeah.
the times were bad, the Dust Bowl and everything, they came because of the steel mill.
Right.
Yeah, they all went to work at the steel mill.
A lot of
Yes.
people from
On
From the
Saturday
east?
mornings, I would wake up, and my grandmother would be in the kitchen talking to Mexicans across the street and Italians up the street,
Do you remember the
Martinelli.
names?
And they
Oh,
would
yeah.
be all talking together, but they all understood one
Yeah,
another.
Portuguese, Spanish, Mexican, Spanish, and
Yeah.
Italian.
'Cause it's
Martinelli's.
Martinelli's lived down the street from you?
Frank Martinelli. Yeah.
And across the street were the Lopez's.
Lopez.
And next door to us were the Millers, who were Portuguese,
They were
but
Portuguese.
their name was Miller, so I'm not sure about that. Maybe it was different.
No, it
Miller,
was Portuguese.
Is that Portuguese? And then we had the DuPonts on one side with their handsome son. And after the DuPonts moved to Centerville, is that where they
Jones
were?
was there.
Then we had the family from Oklahoma move in, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, and they were lovely people. And he planted a huge vegetable garden, corn and popcorn. And he used to tell us that you would light the popcorn field on fire, and that's how the popcorn would pop out. We believed him. And it was really fun.
So this you would say is in the 40s and 50s?
Yeah, I think the late 40s,
They
when the Jones moved in the 50s. I
Late
think.
50s.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this period of 10 years when you were
They probably
growing up.
lived in another home before they
In
bought this
Niles.
one. Yeah, in
Yeah,
Niles,
they lived in Niles.
but not by us all that time. The DuPonts were there for quite a while, huh?
So were there a lot of kids on the street, your age, or in the
Yeah,
neighborhood?
the Bernards.
The Bernards, there's
They
another
had
family.
a large family, and the Liras down the street. They had and
And
Martinelli's.
then, yeah, and then Dingachi
Yeah,
was Pauline, my friend. She's in some of the pictures. And we were friends from kindergarten all the way through high school.
So what were some of the highlights of living in Niles? Now it sounds like you had a lot of relatives first
We
of all
did.
there.
Yeah,
It
we
was our
did.
So you had
family. Our
several
family.
aunts and uncles or
there was never
cousins?
anything that you couldn't do, I should say, that everybody knew about it. You
Yeah.
know.
That could be good or bad, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we had a lot of. At that time, we would call them nosy old ladies. And I think I'm in that category now.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of what you would call gossip that went on, all the ladies would come out of their houses and gather and talk to each other about everybody else.
Yeah.
Oh, so
Right.
there was good and bad about that, I would
And
think.
the big highlight was when the fire truck would go out,
Oh, yes.
you'd go run in the street
Right.
and see which way the fire truck went.
It was volunteer fire.
Oh, you had a volunteer fire
At
department?
Niles had volunteer firemen, and when the siren went off, all the volunteers, and we would watch them run out of their houses and get in their trucks and go up to the firehouse and then wait to see which way
Yeah.
the fire truck
At
went.
that time, there was a lot of young kids that would get drowned at the
Oh, and the
swimming in
canyon.
the Niles Canyon.
Drowned?
Drowned.
Yeah,
Really?
so that was always kind of a scary thing, or fires in the
In the
hills.
fires.
Yeah, yeah. And then, of course, in the Dakota Hills, there was a plane that crashed.
Right.
Right.
And that
I
was
remember
quite
hearing about that.
Yeah, that was
something, you
an
know.
army plane or something.
Yeah.
I don't know, that was in the 50s
Right.
when the plane crashed.
And we would sit on Grandma's porch and look up at the hill that has the Nile sign, and we would see the trucks go up and around because they came up behind. And then we'd see the trucks come back. Or they
The
would-
fire trucks?
No, they were not just fire trucks, but when the plane
From the
crashed.
canyon.
Oh, when the plane
When
crashed,
the plane crashed.
you could
And they
watch.
and they were, picking up the remains of the people that were there, and they
Oh,
would come
golly,
back
so
down.
you remember
I
that?
remember that, yeah. They were
Yeah.
army trucks. I remember
Yeah.
they had that canvas on
We
the
had an
back.
uncle that lived in Union City who was a fireman,
Yeah,
a
Uncle
volunteer
Tony.
fireman, and he went up there and
Mm-hmm.
picked up a lot of the bodies and put them in bags, pieces of bodies.
What was his name, Tony?
Uncle Tony, yeah, Tony Costa, Antone,
Costa.
Antone Costa.
Wow.
He married our aunt Tina. Her
Okay.
name was Leontine, but,
So Tina married Tony Costa. She was
Right.
Tina
and she
Frates. What was her last name? Tina Frates?
No, Martin.
Oh,
They were all
Martin. Okay,
Martins.
got it. Martin.
And
Sorry.
Thelma can tell you about Aunt Tina, because Aunt Tina was a very intelligent lady, and
Oh, yeah, she worked for the newspaper, for the Township Register, did all the proofreading.
The
and-
Township Register at that time was in Niles, correct?
It was in Niles and then it moved to Centerville.
Centerville, yeah.
And I
Township.
went there a couple times and watched the press, when I was in Scouts, and did a lot of things like that.
So tell me about growing up. Let's do the growing up thing here. I did see a picture of you in Scouts. Were both of you in Scouts?
No, just
No.
Thelma.
Lorraine didn't like to belong to clubs, but I did.
See, I was so much younger. I was very attached to my grandmother and my uncle.
Yeah, she was
And I-
attached, and my Uncle Eddie. My Uncle Eddie never married, so to have a baby in the house was very special to him,
Sure.
Yeah, so he,
yeah, I didn't go out a lot like Thelma did. Thelma
Yeah.
was more outgoing.
I was
very
more
bashful.
of get about. I was used to being on my own, so I liked to get out of the house.
So when did you join Scouts?
Huh?
When
I
did you
joined
join
Scouts in the third grade, I think it was, third. And then Mrs. Roding was my
Scout
leader
leader?
because I grew up with Diane Roding. And so I did a lot of fun things at the nursery.
Yeah.
We did a lot of
So
fun
you would
things.
meet at the nursery and then
Yeah.
do your
One time
activities and
we got to pick all the daffodils we wanted at the nursery. I remember taking a big bouquet to my grandma. And I worked in the California nursery selling Girl Scout cookies at the Adobe when they had the bulb show.
mhm.
And we would serve coffee to the people and sell them cookies, and then the ladies from the country club would be there, and we'd sell their sandwiches for the children's hospital. I remember that.
Oh, wow. So you
And
had quite a,
Mrs. Helen Severa made the coffee in the back, in one of the sheds back there, and so every weekend we'd be at the nursery working.
what years were those about? How old were you at that
You were
time?
about 12 or something? Or were
yeah,
you younger, about
yeah.
12?
So that must have been about 1940.
Yeah, about
I was-
1950.
I was in Scouts until I was in the 7th, 8th grade, and then at that time, Diane went to private school, so Mrs. Roding wasn't in charge anymore. So,
Okay, and so you all went to Niles Elementary School, I assume.
Yes,
Right.
we did.
What do you remember about that?
Mr. Bristow.
Mr. Bristow.
He was the principal.
was the
Mr. Turner
principal.
was
Mr. Turner and the teachers, all the teachers.
Yeah.
I remember the teachers.
Yeah, Mrs. Murphy.
And Mrs. Connor, O'Connor, and
Yeah.
Mrs. Enos, and
Yeah,
Mrs. Meeker,
Yeah.
and Linkletter. The teachers were, basically all of them were very kind.
Yeah, they were.
There was like maybe one or two that
they were
was
like
strict.
family too.
Yeah, they
It
were
was,
like family.
Mr. Bristow was like family.
Yeah.
We went to his house one time,
Yeah.
and
And everybody knew my grandma. Everybody knew my grandma because she had worked for so many people. And
So what did she do after the SNA? You said, I knew she'd washed for SNA, but what
She
kind of
took
work
care
did
of
she
she
do?
washed clothes and
Yeah,
she cleaned up
babysat.
people's houses
Mhm.
and I remember I used to Mrs. Murray, that was
Oh,
the
yeah,
librarian at the library.
Mhm.
I used to go and mop her floor for her
Mm-hmm.
when she got older. You know, she couldn't do it anymore. So I'd go clean house for her.
Mhm. She was really
Yeah.
sick. She had asthma or something.
Yeah, she had asthma.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, she couldn't breathe really good.
So what activities do you remember that were fun? What did you do?
I read a lot. I used
She
to.
read, yeah.
You went to the library and read a lot. And
I saw the pet parade.
And-
Were you always in the pet parade, everybody,
Yeah.
or what?
No,
Yeah.
not maybe.
we went. There was a lot of parades.
We
then.
went to the parades, but my cousins, Donna and Carol Green, they are my mom's twins. She had 2 daughters, and my mother had 2 daughters. And they had the chickens, they had the chicken ranch. And
Where was that, in
that's
Niles?
across,
Where?
yeah, across from the nursery property at that
That's
time.
past the California nursery.
Where the Hacienda Gardens is now. That used to be all nursery. And
Okay.
they lived across from them, from there. And my uncle got chicks from Kimber Farms. And he raised chicks for laying, and he raised them for fryers, which they just grow them for a certain amount of weeks, and then they slaughter them and sell them to the stores. And we would go over there Saturday mornings. We cleaned house first before we left Grandma's house. And then we would walk, like Thelma said, to my aunt and uncle's ranch and help them gather eggs, and we'd play, and we got to ride bicycles when we were there, which we couldn't do at Grandma's house. And we got to do fun things down there that we didn't get to do at home. And they also built a swimming pool a few years after they built their house, and we'd go swimming.
How
Yeah,
fun.
that was, to me, the highlight was going to Aunt Ida's.
Yeah.
And they had 2, now did they have children also?
Yeah,
Those
2
were the
did.
Yeah,
ones
they
with
had the 2 daughters.
And
they
what were their
later,
names?
Later in life, in the 50s, they got a swimming pool.
Yeah.
So that was fun. We
Yeah, we
played
got-
games in the swimming pool
Yeah.
with the Lesh family, because they lived next door.
Oh, the
What was the name?
Lesh, Barbara
Oh,
Lesh.
Barbara
Oh,
Lesh.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I talked with Barbara
Yeah, with
Lesh,
her
and,
sisters and brothers.
they had chickens too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they did. Yes, they did.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, was this something that,
They were right next door to each other, and Mr. Lesh and Uncle Ken were very good friends.
Yes,
You know,
they
even
were.
though they did the same business, they were very good friends.
well, did they slaughter their chickens? Because I know the Leshes had a building just for, you know,
Chicken.
they had to be clean for slaughtering the chickens and
Yeah.
water. Did they use the same facility, or did they?
Well, see, they had, Aunt Ida had 2 acres out there. So they had, the house was up front, and then they had the chickens in the back.
Right.
But where did they slaughter them?
Right there on the property.
Right there on the property.
Did they have a special building for slaughtering the chickens?
Not really. It was
Not
like a
really.
garage. Yeah.
You gotta remember when this was.
I
It was
remember
like- yeah.
it was a big thing on a Saturday night when they would kill the chickens in the morning, and then we would have to pluck the chickens.
Mm-hmm.
We'd all help, you know, the whole family.
And did they sell them to supermarkets,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
just
So
to
Or
people who
individuals.
stores and, yeah.
A lot of people came just to the ranch and bought eggs and
Bought eggs.
chickens.
Yeah, all day long when we were there, people would drive in and buy eggs.
So they made their livelihood from the chickens.
Right.
Right.
So how
And
many
then-
chickens did they house?
Yeah, they
Yeah.
were very, my uncle was very active in the hatchery in Hayward, you know, the credit union for the farm.
And he also worked at the steel mill.
Yeah, he worked at the
He
steel
worked
mill
at the steel mill and had his ranch.
yeah, for a while.
Mm-hmm. And then they, later on in life, my Uncle Ken bought Joe's Corner.
Yeah,
And he
Ken, what,
owned
now
Joe's
what was
Corner.
his name? What was his?
Ken Green, Kenneth Green.
he
Okay.
was originally from Montana.
Uh-huh. And he was in the Navy, and that's how he and Aunt Ida met. And when they bought that property there, which belonged to the Rebellos first.
Yeah, the Ribello family had
Right.
it first.
Had
and
which
he-
first? Which, Joe's Corner?
No,
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 the
the,
farm.
where
The
the ranch
farm
was.
property,
Yeah, the
okay.
ranch. And Uncle Ken brought his parents from Montana to live there. They had a little house on their property, Aunt Ida and Uncle Ken's property. And they were, they could not hear and they could not speak, both of his parents.
Oh,
And they
okay.
lived there, so we got to experience that.
Oh,
My
that's,
cousins could speak with their hands
Sign,
fluently,
yeah.
and we'd always go, "What'd they say?" You know, and they would tell us, and they'd talk back, tell them what we said. And
The father would write it down all the time. He'd
yeah,
write it on
yeah,
pad.
the grandpa. So Mr. and Mrs. Green, which we call Grandpa Green and Grandma Green.
so both of you grew up there all your life, basically, and anything else you want to tell me about either the businesses in downtown or some things that you
Well,
remember
it was
about
fun,
Niles?
you know, because we had everything there. You
Mm-hmm.
know, even though the town was on one side of the street, we still had a lot of shops. We had a car dealership. We had a lot of
That
beauty
was
shops.
Pontiac, I think, right? Pontiac car
Yeah, the
dealership?
Julio Pontiac.
The Julio
And
Pontiac.
we had a lumber yard.
What was that, Osborne or
P.C. Hansen.
P.T. Hansen?
Oh yeah.
Lumber, and we had
Grocery
Charles
store.
Frick had a plumbing place there.
Uh-huh.
We had a newspaper at one time, which was I think they called it then the Washington News, wasn't it? Then it became the Township Register.
Uh-huh.
And did you know who was in charge of that?
I think it was Oaks.
Oh yes.
Do you
George
remember
Oaks.
him?
George Oaks.
Oats, that's right.
Do you remember George Oaks?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
What kind of a person was he?
He was a jolly person. He was fun. Yeah. Yeah. I remember he was my Aunt Tina's boss, and
Mm-hmm.
my Aunt Tina was very active in the Chamber of Commerce.
Aunt Adelaide worked for Shuckles County, also in the office.
Yeah, and
Uh-huh.
she worked for the Centerville one too, the
County.
Niles and the Centerville one.
County.
And my Uncle Sal, he drove trucks for Shuckles. Sal
Uncle
Russo.
Russo. Do you know which building in Niles is the Ellsworth building?
Yes.
Okay, they lived upstairs in the apartments.
Yeah.
Yeah, before they moved to San Leandro in the Oakland area.
What's
Yes.
your-
I
after.
went to Washington Union High, and I graduated from Washington High. And in March before I graduated, I was lucky enough to get a job at the Niles Bank, which at that time was First Western Bank. I went in as a secretary, and then later I came a teller.
And
So
where
I
was
didn't
that?
drive, so it was ideal to get a job in the
Right in
same little
Niles.
town.
It's the first.
Niles and
Right.
where the Fremont Bank is. The manager was Carmichael, Ralph Carmichael, and he started the Fremont Bank later in years.
Well, we used to walk to Niles.
Because we
School.
would have to we walked in Niles Grammar
We
School,
walked to grammar school.
but we would have to catch the bus at Joe's Corner. And it would come at 7:30, and sometimes you'd have to run for the bus because
And if you missed it, you didn't go to school that day.
yeah, and it made a lot of stops on the way.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember when it stopped at which is now the Hub. At that time, it was Mallory was a gravel road when I went to high school, and it made a lot of stops at all the little farmhouses.
Oh, okay, okay. And so what year did you graduate from high school?
1956. It was a fun place to go because, and I think it was kind of neat because we knew everybody, you know,
Yeah.
and we knew people from Newark and from Alpharetta and Dakota, and all of us met. And we would wait in the hallway for different buses to arrive. I remember waiting for the Newark bus because I had a couple of friends from Newark, and we'd wait for that bus. And I remember going over to the L&V and having a cup of coffee while my girlfriend would smoke her cigarettes. And
You could go off campus, just
Yes.
go over
Oh,
there?
yeah, it was open
It
campus
was open
back
campus.
then.
And then they had the black and white next door across the street from the Washington High where you could have lunch if you wanted. Sit on the lawn and did things.
Yeah,